Karishma, and I am 29 years old. On paper, my life looks fine, respectable, even. I work as a graphic designer at a small marketing agency in Chicago. I rent a modest one-bedroom apartment where the pipes knock every time someone showers upstairs, and my dining table is also my work desk. Most weekdays end with me hunched over my laptop at midnight, tweaking font sizes for clients who use the word urgent like punctuation. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. I buy my own candles on sale, call it self-care, and tell myself that one day all this quiet hard work will add up to something solid. A home, a family, a life that feels like it belongs to me. But if you asked anyone in my family who the main character is, they would not say my name. They would say Cambria. My older sister, Cambria Karishma, has been the star of our family for as long as I can remember. Beautiful, confident, magnetic. She was the kind of person who walked into a room and, without trying, bent the social gravity toward herself. In our suburban Chicago home, she was homecoming queen, lead in every school musical, the girl who always had a date to every dance. I was the opposite. I was the kid who preferred the library to the bleachers, who actually read the assigned books instead of Googling summaries. I wore cardigans, not sequins. I drew in the margins of my notebook instead of flirting in the hallways. And the strange thing is, I never really resented that. Cambria thrived on attention. I thrived on peace. She took the spotlight. I curled up in the quiet edges. It worked. For a long time, it worked. Our parents, to their credit, loved us both. But the way the world reflected us back was always different. Cambria was the fireworks. I was the candle on the kitchen counter. Easy to overlook, but steady. That unspoken balance held until our late 20s. Cambria was 32. I was 29. And by then, something in her had started to crack. Her love life had become a blur of names and faces. Men who appeared in our family group chat photos for a month or two and then vanished, leaving only dramatic stories behind. It wasn't bad luck. It was a pattern. Cambria would meet someone, fall hard in days, not weeks. Within a month, she'd be demanding constant attention and elaborate proofs of devotion. If they didn't text back fast enough, it was an insult. If they wanted one night to themselves, it meant they were emotionally unavailable. She dug her nails into relationships so tightly that sooner or later they broke. And when they did, it was never her fault. They're intimidated by my success. He couldn't handle a strong woman. He's obviously still hung up on his ex. Always an excuse. Never a moment of, maybe I am part of the problem. Meanwhile, my life was boring by her standards, steady by mine. I'd been dating Dalton Crawford for 2 years. He's a software engineer with a quiet sense of humor and a calm presence that fits me like a well-worn sweater. We met in a coffee shop in Lincoln Park, me with my tablet and stylus, working on freelance logo concepts, him with his laptop and a tangle of code. He asked what I was drawing. I looked up, slightly annoyed at the interruption. 3 hours later, the coffee was cold, the sun outside had turned orange, and I was laughing at one of his dry, throwaway jokes that no one else in the cafe had even noticed. Cambria had met Dalton several times at family gatherings. To his face, she was perfectly polite. Afterward, her comments were not. "He's a bit boring, isn't he?" she'd say, laughing lightly. "I mean, I guess it suits you, but still." Or, "I'm honestly surprised you're satisfied with someone so plain. I always pictured you with someone more dynamic." I told myself her words didn't matter. Dalton made me feel safe, seen, loved in a way that wasn't loud, but deep. That should have been enough. I just didn't realize how dangerous my happiness looked through Cambria's eyes. The day Dalton proposed, I felt like my entire life suddenly snapped into focus. He drove us out to Starved Rock State Park on a crisp October morning, the kind where the air feels like a cold apple against your skin. Leaves were burning red and gold on the trees. He'd packed a picnic, because of course he had. Turkey and brie sandwiches from my favorite deli, fresh strawberries, a lemon pound cake we usually only splurged on for birthdays. "I wanted today to feel like its own holiday," he said, a little sheepish. We hiked to an overlook above the Illinois River. The water below moved slowly, gleaming in the sunlight. Dalton kept checking his pocket, and even though I pretended not to notice, my heart knew. I'd felt it building for months. The way he looked at me, the way he'd started sentences with "when we" instead of "if we." When he finally sank down on one knee, his hands were shaking. "Linda," he said, voice rougher than usual, "I've never been good with big speeches, but I know this. I want to spend the rest of my life building ordinary days with you. The quiet ones, the good ones. Will you marry me?" The ring he held out wasn't huge. It wasn't some Instagram showpiece. It was simple, elegant, set in white gold with a round sapphire at the center and a halo of tiny diamonds. If I had been allowed to design it myself, I wouldn't have changed a thing. My eyes blurred. "Yes," I said. "Of course I will. Yes." We laughed, cried, kissed. He almost dropped the ring, trying to get it on my finger because his hands were trembling so much. It caught the sunlight and flashed a brilliant blue. In that moment, all I could think about was how excited I was to tell my family. I wanted my mom's squeal, my dad's proud handshake, maybe even Cambria's dramatic, "oh my God," hug. Some stubborn part of me still believed my big sister would be happy for me. We drove straight to my parents' house in Oak Park that same evening. Sunday dinner, a ritual we'd kept alive long after moving out. I sat in the passenger seat, my newly adorned left hand tucked into my jacket pocket, thumb brushing the cool metal over and over. "This feels surreal," I murmured. Dalton glanced over, smiling. "In a good way, I hope." "In the best way." I hesitated. "I just hope it goes well tonight, with everyone." He didn't ask what I meant. He already knew enough about my sister to understand. Inside the house, everything was comfortingly familiar. The smell of tomato sauce simmering. The sound of my dad's laugh drifting from the living room. My mom's voice calling, "Is that you, honey?" Cambria was already there, sitting at the dining table, scrolling through her phone with a stormy look on her face. She barely glanced up when we walked in. "Hi," I said, fighting the urge to hide my hand behind my back again. Dinner started normally. Dad asked Dalton about a new project at work. Mom talked about her garden, proud of the tomatoes that finally decided to ripen. Cambria picked at her chicken parmesan, jaw tight, checking her phone every few minutes like she was waiting for a life or death message that refused to arrive. "Everything okay, sweetie?" Mom asked. "Fine." Cambria's fork clinked against the plate. "Just another dating app idiot. Looked great on paper. Turned out to be a complete waste of my time." Her bitterness settled over the table like smoke. I felt my excitement pressing up against it, trying to find room to breathe. Part of me whispered, "Maybe wait. Tell them next week." But the ring on my finger felt like a promise I needed to bring into the light. After dinner, my heart thudding in my chest, I stood up and reached for Dalton's hand. We have some news," I said. Dalton squeezed my fingers. I took a breath, pulled my hand from my jacket pocket, and let the ring catch the dining room light. "We're engaged." For a second, there was silence. Then my mother screamed, in the good way. She practically flew out of her chair, wrapping me in a hug so tight my ribs protested. My dad came around the table, shaking Dalton's hand and clapping him on the shoulder like he'd personally won a championship. My parents' joy washed over me, warm and overwhelming. This is how it's supposed to feel, I thought. This is how family is supposed to be. Everyone was celebrating, everyone except Cambria. She sat frozen, eyes locked on my hand. Her face, usually so perfectly controlled, flickered. First pale, then a flush creeping up from her neck to her cheeks. "Let me see it," she said finally, her voice flat. I walked over, hand extended, still smiling. "Isn't it beautiful? Dalton." She grabbed my wrist, yanking my hand closer. Her grip was too tight. The sapphire sparkled between us. "It's small," she said. The smile slipped from my lips, just a little. "I love it. It's perfect for me." "When's the wedding?" she asked. The question sounded mechanical, like she was reading from a script she hadn't rehearsed enough. "Probably next spring," I said, "when the weather's nice." She dropped my hand so abruptly my fingers stung. "Congratulations," she said. The word landed on the table like a stone. No hug, no smile, no eye contact. She stood up, grabbed her purse, and headed for the door. "Cambria?" Mom said, startled. "Honey, where are you going?" "Early morning tomorrow," she muttered. "Long week ahead." The front door slammed harder than necessary. The silence she left behind rang in my ears. "That was odd," Mom said softly. Dad forced a chuckle, trying to smooth the air like he always did after one of Cambria's moods. "She's probably just tired. You know how she gets when work is stressful." I nodded, forcing myself to swallow the hard lump in my throat. This was my moment. I told myself I wouldn't let her ruin it. But deep down, something cold unfurled in my chest. In the split second before she dropped my hand, I had seen it in her eyes. Not just sadness, Something sharper, something I didn't yet have a name for. I told myself I was imagining it. I had no idea I'd just watched the first crack in a dam that was about to burst and drown everything I loved. If the night of our engagement had been a movie, the credits would have rolled, on my parents hugging us and everyone laughing around the dinner table. Fade out on a perfect frame. Real life didn't fade out. It bled into the next day and the next and the next, where things started to warp. The first sign was the phone calls. At first, they seemed normal or close enough. Cambria would call me on her lunch break or on her drive home from work. So, she'd say, breezy, tell me everything. How did he do it? Was it romantic or just him tripping over his own shoes and asking? I'd laugh, grateful she was at least pretending to be interested. It was sweet, I'd say, describing the hike, the river, the ring. Very us. A pause. How much did the ring cost, anyway? The first time she asked, I thought I'd misheard. What? The ring, she repeated, a little slower, as if I were dense. You know, sapphire, diamonds, all that. What's Dalton's budget? I'm just curious. I don't know, I lied. I had an idea, of course. I knew roughly what his salary was. I knew what that kind of ring would cost. But something about her tone made me clutch the number to my chest, like it was a secret I had to protect. Come on, she pressed. He must have told you. You two share everything, right? Cambria, why does it matter? I tried to keep my voice light. Another pause. When she spoke again, her tone had smoothed over, like fresh icing hiding a crack in the cake. Just making conversation, she said. No need to get defensive. I told myself I was being oversensitive, that the tension at dinner had been a blip, nothing more. But the calls didn't stop, they multiplied. Early mornings, right before my work calls, 10 minutes before I was supposed to leave the house. So, has he introduced you to his entire family yet? Every single one? Did he cry when he proposed, or was it just you? Are you sure he's not rushing into this because he's desperate, Linda? Every question felt less like curiosity and more like an audit, like she was looking for a flaw in the story, evidence that I didn't deserve this happiness. At night, when I'd finally close my laptop and try to let my brain cool down from client revisions, my phone would buzz again. You know, she'd say, her voice slightly slurred some nights, long engagements are risky. You never know how people might change their minds. Cambria, we've been together for 2 years, I'd answer, staring at the ceiling in the dark. This isn't sudden. 2 years isn't that long. Some of my relationships lasted that long. I didn't respond to that. We both knew lasted for Cambria meant burned hot and fell apart in a spectacular explosion once he breathed wrong. Anyway, she'd sigh, I just don't want you to end up blindsided, that's all. The irony of those words would only hit me months later. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after the engagement, I made a decision I thought would help. I asked her to be my maid of honor. We were sitting in a cafe near my office, the kind of place with exposed brick and plants hanging from the ceiling. She stirred sugar into her latte like she was punishing it. I wanted to ask you something, I began, palms damp. It should have been a happy moment. It felt like walking into a negotiation. She glanced up, mascara perfect, mouth painted in a red that always looked too sharp on her. What? I'd like you to be my maid of honor, I said. If you want to, I mean. For a long moment, she just stared at me. Her expression was unreadable, like a mask still being chosen. Of course, she said finally with a small laugh. I mean, it would be weird if you didn't ask me, right? The words were technically correct. The tone made something in my chest tighten. I'm honored, Linda, she added, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. It's just a lot to take on right now. My own life is kind of a mess. We don't have to plan everything right away, I said quickly, rushing to soothe her when I was the one asking for support. We can go at whatever pace works. She took a long sip of her latte. We'll see, she said. That became the theme of the following months. We'll see, followed by 1,000 cuts. Every wedding decision I made became a test I hadn't agreed to take. The venue's in downtown Naperville, I explained over the phone one night, excited. It's small but cozy, lots of natural light. It's too small, she replied immediately. Your guests will feel cramped. You should pick somewhere bigger. People will talk, if it feels cheap. I stared at the Pinterest board on my laptop, the images that had made my heart swell just hours earlier. Now, under her voice, they all looked inadequate. The dress is simple, I told her another time, showing her a photo in a boutique mirror. A-line, lace sleeves, a silhouette that made me feel like myself, not like I was playing a role. It's unflattering on your body type, Cambria said, tilting her head, studying my reflection like a stylist on a mean reality show. You should pick something with more structure or more drama. This looks average. It's comfortable, I protested weakly. I feel good in it. Comfortable? She scoffed. It's your wedding, not a nap. Even the color scheme wasn't safe. Dusty blue and cream, she repeated when I showed her the palette. Boring. Everyone does those colors. Don't you want your wedding to stand out? I want it to feel like us, I said. I hated how small my voice sounded. She volunteered to help, offering to take some things off my plate. But every task she touched turned into something she could criticize later. Phone calls to vendors became opportunities to complain about how amateur my choices were. Group chats became stages where she could undermine my decisions with subtle jabs wrapped in emoji. After one particularly draining day of planning, I found myself at Serena's apartment, curled up on her couch with a mug of tea I hadn't touched. She hates everything, I said. The flowers, the dress, the food, the venue, literally everything. Serena frowned. Your sister or an anonymous internet troll? Same energy, I muttered. Linda, Serena set her mug down. This is supposed to be your happy time. If she's making you miserable, you need to pull back. She's my sister. And? Serena's voice was gentle but firm. Being related to you doesn't give her a license to wreck your mental health. Set boundaries. I stared at the steam curling up from my mug. The word boundaries hovered between us, like a foreign concept I'd heard of but didn't speak fluently. I'll try, I said. I wasn't sure I meant it. 2 weeks later was my bridal shower. Mom and Serena had organized it at my parents' house. Soft decorations in my wedding colors, plates of finger foods, little games that weren't humiliating, just fun. The kind of afternoon you'd expect before a wedding. Gentle, excited, safe. I arrived with a box of cupcakes, heart light for the first time in weeks. Friends from college were there, a couple of coworkers, my aunts. The music was low, laughter floating easily through the rooms. Cambria arrived 40 minutes late. When she walked in, the air shifted. She wore a tight red dress that clung to every line of her body and heels that clicked sharply against the floor. Her makeup was flawless, her hair perfectly styled. She looked like she was headed to a nightclub, not a relaxed afternoon party in our parents' living room. Sorry I'm late, she announced. Traffic was insane. It's Sunday, Serena murmured under her breath next to me. There is no traffic. I swallowed a smile. Cambria made a slow circle of the room, collecting compliments on her dress, her hair, her everything. When she finally reached me, she looked me up and down. Simple blue dress, minimal makeup, my engagement ring catching the light. You look cute, she said. The word landed like small. Very you. I tried to accept it as a compliment. As the afternoon went on, she refilled her champagne glass more often than anyone else. Her laugh became louder, edged with something brittle. I noticed the way some of my friends began watching her, trading looks when they thought I wasn't paying attention. At one point, Mom tapped her glass with a spoon. Okay, everyone, she smiled. Let's do a toast for our bride-to-be. My chest warmed. This was the part I'd dreamed about, being surrounded by women who loved me, celebrating the next chapter of my life. But Mom didn't get to speak first. Cambria stepped forward, glass raised. I'll go, she said brightly. Too brightly. The room quieted. To Linda, she began, smiling in my direction. There was a tightness around her eyes I didn't like. Who has somehow managed to find what the rest of us can't. A few polite chuckles. Serena's shoulders tensed beside me. Must be nice, Cambria continued, her voice smooth as glass. To be so lucky. The word lucky felt like a slap. She didn't talk about me being kind or loyal or patient. She didn't mention the late nights helping her through breakups, the times I'd gone to pick her up when she'd drunk texted me from bars, the emotional cleanup I'd done after her disasters. No, the unspoken message was clear. I had stumbled into something she deserved. Anyway, she said, lifting her glass a little higher. Congratulations, little sister. May your perfect little life stay perfect. She drank. The room was silent for a beat longer than normal. Then people followed, sipping awkwardly. Someone tried to make a joke. Someone else clapped too loudly. Serena leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. What the hell was that? I stared at my sister, who was now laughing with one of my coworkers like nothing had happened. I don't know, I said, but I did. For the first time, the feeling I'd been pushing down had a name. This wasn't just jealousy. It felt like hatred, carefully disguised as a toast. That night, alone in my apartment, I sat on the edge of my bed and turned my ring around and around on my finger. I wondered, for the first time, if the price of my happiness was going to be the slow, painful dismantling of whatever was left of my relationship with my sister. What I didn't know yet was that slow wouldn't last much longer. If there was one thing I'd always believed about Cambria, it was this. No matter how dramatic she got, she always stopped before things became truly dangerous. But in the weeks before my wedding, that belief began to unravel, thread by thread, until it snapped completely. It started at the rehearsal dinner. Dalton and I had chosen a small restaurant in Wheaton, cozy and warm, with string lights and wood-paneled booths. The kind of place that made you want to lean close and talk quietly because everything felt soft around the edges. Friends and family gathered, smiling, hugging us, asking about plans and honeymoon destinations. For a moment, I allowed myself to breathe. Everything was beautiful, normal, safe. Then Cambria walked in. She was hanging on the arm of a man none of us had ever seen before. He looked uncomfortable the second the door closed behind them, hands hovering awkwardly at his sides, eyes darting like he was searching for the exit. Cambria held his arm with the stiff enthusiasm of someone dragging a prize into the room. Her smile was bright, too bright. "This is Nathan," she announced, her chin lifting slightly. "My date." Even Dalton had to fight the instinctive "oh no" that flickered across his face. Mom hugged Nathan politely. Dad shook his hand, and I, trying to be gracious, said, "It's nice to meet you." He swallowed, Adam's apple bobbing. "You too." Cambria clung to his arm all night, laughing too loudly at jokes no one else found funny, brushing her hair back dramatically anytime Dalton and I shared a look. At one point, Nathan excused himself to the restroom and didn't come back for 15 minutes. "I think he's hiding," Serena whispered. "I think he's terrified," I whispered back. When Cambria finally noticed his long absence, her smile cracked. She stalked off to find him, returning with a forced laugh. "He got lost," she said through clenched teeth. Nathan's pale face said otherwise. By dessert, her mask had slipped. She kept staring at me, at the ring on my finger, her eyes sharpening each time someone congratulated Dalton and me, every time he touched my hand, every time my name was spoken with joy. On the drive home, Dalton reached over and took my hand gently. "Linda," he said softly, "you need to create some space from her, after the wedding, maybe even before." "She's my sister," I said, though the words felt like excuses I didn't believe anymore. "That doesn't mean she gets to hurt you," he replied. "And she is hurting you." I didn't argue, because he was right. But even then, I didn't understand what he truly meant. 2 nights before the wedding, Cambria called me at 11 p.m. I stared at the vibrating phone, exhausted, hoping she'd hang up. She didn't. When I answered, I could already hear her sobbing. "He left," she wailed. "Nathan left. He blocked me. He said I was—" Her breath hitched. "Too much. Too intense. That I scared him." Her voice cracked into a raw cry. "I can't do this anymore, Linda. Why does this keep happening to me? Why can't I find what you have?" I sat up in bed, rubbing my forehead. "It's okay. Maybe you're just coming on too strong." "Oh, please." Her tone snapped instantly to venom. "Like you know anything about dating. You got lucky with Dalton. He's just desperate enough to settle for someone like you." The words sliced cleanly into me. I didn't realize tears were falling until Dalton gently took the phone from my hand and hung up. My voice shook. "I should call her back." "No," Dalton said softly but firmly. "Not tonight." I knew he was right. But part of me, the part that had grown up chasing Cambria's approval like sunlight, ached with guilt. The morning of the wedding arrived with picture-perfect weather. Early June sunlight, gentle breeze, the air warm but not humid, the kind of day brides dream of. My suite at the venue smelled like hairspray and flowers. Mom was doing last-minute steaming of my veil. Serena was scrolling through our playlist. Cambria sat in a corner chair, silent, sunglasses still on, though we were indoors. I'd expected awkwardness, but I hadn't expected that look. She kept checking her phone. Again, again, again. Each time her expression tightened more. At last, I forced myself to ask, "Everything okay?" She slowly lowered her sunglasses. "My date from last night ghosted me," she said coldly. "He won't text back." "I'm sorry, but—" "But what?" she snapped, eyes flashing. "You don't care because your life is perfect. Your fiancé is perfect. Your wedding is perfect." Mom straightened, alarmed. "Cambria, that's enough." Cambria stood abruptly, swaying slightly, hungover, furious, barely holding herself together. "Right," she said, voice thick with sarcasm. "It's Linda's perfect day. Linda's perfect little life. Serena moved to stand between us subtly. My heart began to pound. Cambria, I love you, I said quietly, and I want you to be happy too. But this is my wedding day. I need you to support me. She stared at me like she didn't recognize who was speaking. Support you? She repeated, a trembling laugh escaping. I've done nothing but support you. I agreed to be in this stupid wedding even though it's killing me to watch you have everything I want. That's not my fault, I said, voice cracking despite my effort to stay calm. Oh, but it is, she hissed. You think you're so special with that pathetic ring? Cambria, I whispered. Stop, you're scaring me. Her eyes sharpened, fixed, predatory. I'm scaring you? She said, stepping closer. You're the one rubbing your engagement in my face when you know I can't find anyone. I wasn't rubbing anything, I said, backing away. Liar. She lunged. It happened faster than thought. Her fist hit my cheek with a brutal crack. Pain exploded in my skull. I stumbled backward, my dress catching under me. My vision blurred. Another blow. Another. I hit the floor hard. My veil tore. The air left my lungs. Mom screamed. Serena shouted for help. Cambria didn't stop. She grabbed my hair, dragging me toward her, fists raining down, my ribs, my jaw, my eye socket. I curled my arms over my head, sobbing, choking, unable to even process that this was happening. Then she grabbed something, a glass vase. No, no, Serena screamed. The vase shattered against my skull with a sickening crack. The lights above me fractured into shards of white. I felt warm liquid running down my face. Voices blurred. My own heartbeat thundered in my ears. Mom tried to pull her away. Cambria shoved her so hard that Mom crashed into a chair. Another hit, another. The world dimmed. My last thought before darkness swallowed me whole was simple, devastating, and unbearably true. My sister is trying to kill me. The world returned as a flicker. White light, muffled voices, a throbbing, so deep it felt like my skull was filled with rushing water. Someone was holding my hand. Someone was crying. I forced my eyes open. Fluorescent lights glared down at me like interrogation lamps. The air smelled like antiseptic and plastic curtains. A monitor beeped steadily beside my ear. Linda? A voice cracked. Dalton. His face hovered above mine, ashen, terrified, eyes swollen like he'd been crying for hours. When he saw I was awake, his entire body sagged, as if he'd been holding himself together by force. Oh my God, he whispered, pressing my knuckles to his lips. You're awake, thank God. I turned my head slightly. An agony shot through the left side of my face like a lightning bolt. I gasped. Dalton immediately reached for the call button. Mom appeared on my other side, mascara smeared, eyes red-rimmed. Dad stood near the foot of the bed, stiff, older than he had ever looked in my entire life. What happened? I rasped. The effort of speaking made my throat burn. Every breath hurt. Every inch of me felt wrong. Dalton's voice broke. You were unconscious for 3 hours. Mom sniffed hard. Honey, Cambria, she beat you, Dad said bluntly. Anger and grief braided tightly in his tone. In your wedding dress. The memories broke open then. Not in order, not fully, but in jagged shards. Her face twisted with rage, her fist, the vase, the sounds I couldn't separate, my screams, Mom's, Serena's. Then darkness. I flinched, instinctively shrinking into the bed. Pain flared everywhere. A doctor entered then, clipboard in hand, giving my family a moment to step back. His voice was calm, too calm, as though reading grocery lists instead of describing the damage. Linda, he said gently, you sustained multiple injuries. He listed them one by one. Concussion, fractured orbital bone around your left eye, broken nose, a cracked rib, severe contusions on the face, torso, arms, lacerations requiring 12 stitches around the temple and scalp. His voice blurred. I felt detached, like he was talking about a stranger, someone whose body I had borrowed but didn't quite inhabit. The most important thing, he concluded, is that you're stable, you're safe now. Safe. The word felt unreal. What about my wedding? I whispered. Mom took my hand carefully. Sweetheart, we postponed it. That's not important right now. You are. I nodded weakly, tears burning the corners of my eyes. A beat passed before I found the courage to ask the next question. Where is Cambria? Dad exhaled sharply, the sound halfway between a sigh and a growl. Arrested, he said, charged with aggravated assault. They took her away in handcuffs. My heart cracked. Not because I wanted her free, but because the reality of what she'd done finally had a name and a consequence. Mom pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. She was screaming the whole time, shouting that it was self-defense, that you provoked her. Self-defense, against a sister standing still in a wedding dress. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity, but my ribs ached too much. That evening, Serena visited. She was still shaken, hands trembling as she sat beside me, recounting the attack in halting words. "I've never seen anything like it," she said, voice wavering. It was like something exploded inside her. She wasn't Cambria. She wasn't human for a moment. It was pure rage. Her eyes filled with tears. "I thought she was going to kill you, Linda. If the staff hadn't rushed in when they heard the screaming..." She couldn't finish. I squeezed her hand, or tried to. Even the motion hurt. "Thank you for saving me," I whispered. "You saved yourself," she said fiercely. "Don't forget that." But I didn't feel saved. I felt broken in ways I didn't yet have the vocabulary for. The first night in the hospital was long. Nurses came and went. Pain medication blurred time. Dalton refused to leave my side, sleeping in the uncomfortable chair with his hand wrapped around mine. At 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of Mom and Dad whispering near the doorway. Dad's voice was low and weighted. "I don't recognize her anymore." Mom sniffled. "She was always emotional. But this is something else." "She could have killed Linda," Dad said. The words trembled with fury. "Our daughter, on her wedding day." Mom didn't respond, but her silence said everything. I closed my eyes again, unable to bear the look on their faces when they realized I was awake. Cambria's arraignment happened while I was still in the hospital. Her plea, not guilty, her claim. I provoked her, her story, self-defense. It was insulting and disgusting, and somehow exactly what I should have expected. The evidence, witness testimonies, my injuries, the venue's security footage painted a different truth. A horrifying, undeniable truth. Mom tried to visit Cambria before the hearing. She returned pale and trembling. "She kept asking if we'd tell the court you started it," Mom whispered, hugging herself. "She said she barely touched you. She said you exaggerated to ruin her life." Ruin her life? I lifted my swollen gaze to Mom. "She almost ruined mine." Mom broke down then, tears spilling freely. Dad held her, jaw clenched, so tightly a muscle twitched. "She needs help," Mom sobbed. "But I don't know if she even wants it." "Wanting help," Dad said harshly, "requires admitting you did something wrong." And Cambria had never been good at that. A mandatory psychiatric evaluation was ordered. It confirmed what many of us already suspected. No psychosis, no delusions, no severe mental illness. Just traits, dangerous ones. Narcissistic personality structure, emotional dysregulation, impulsivity, envy-driven aggression, lack of empathy, extreme entitlement. In plain language, she knew exactly what she was doing. She just didn't care who she hurt. Hearing that was strangely worse than the alternative. Insanity could be treated. This was a choice. Day by day, I healed physically, though slowly. Emotionally, I was unraveling. Sleep was a battlefield. Every time someone walked too close, my muscles tensed like they were bracing for impact. Every time a nurse tapped me awake, I flinched violently. I couldn't even look at my wedding dress. The thought of it made my stomach curl. Dalton sat with me each night, his thumb tracing circles on the back of my hand. "We'll get married when you're ready," he whispered once. "Even if it's just the two of us at a courthouse. I don't care about the ceremony. I only care about you." I cried quietly into his shoulder, not because of the attack, but because of the kind of man he was. Gentle when everything else felt brutal. I'd expected a wedding to give my life a fairy tale chapter. Instead, it taught me something darker. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protection from. And sometimes the sharpest knives are held by the hands you grew up trusting. 4 months after the attack, I walked into the courthouse with Dalton's hand in mine and a knot of dread tightening beneath my ribs. My injuries had mostly healed, at least the ones visible on my skin. The bruises had faded to yellow, the stitches had dissolved, and the swelling around my eye had finally gone down enough that I recognized myself again in the mirror. But the emotional wounds, they were still raw, and stepping into that courtroom felt like ripping them open all over again. Mom and Dad sat behind us in the gallery, close enough for support, but far enough to let me breathe. Mom looked tired, not physically, but in her soul. Dad's jaw was rigid, the muscle near his temple still twitching whenever Cambria's name came up. And then she entered. Cambria walked in wearing a pale suit provided by the state, wrists unshackled for the hearing, but flanked by officers. She looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but in presence. Her hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail. Her face was scrubbed of makeup. But her eyes were the same, cold, entitled, aggrieved. As if she were the one who had been wronged. When her gaze met mine, her mouth curled slightly, not remorse, but resentment. Like I had stolen something from her. Like she still believed that my happiness was an insult she had every right to punish. Her attorney asked for leniency based on her lack of criminal history and her emotional distress following a failed romantic relationship. The judge, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a sharper voice, was unimpressed. "Miss Karishma," she said, her tone steady and cutting, "you brutally attacked your sister on her wedding day. You fractured her bones. You struck her repeatedly while she was incapacitated. You violated a no-contact order twice, attempting to blame her for your actions. You have shown absolutely no remorse." Cambria opened her mouth, as if she might argue with the judge of all people, but the judge held up a hand. "This court sentences you to 5 years in prison," she said, with credit for time served, followed by 3 years of probation and mandatory counseling. A gasp rippled through the courtroom, my mother's. Cambria's face twisted, not into grief, but into rage. Pure, undiluted rage. "You're ruining my life," she burst out. The officer stepped forward immediately. I stared at her, stunned. There it was again, that terrifying, delusional belief that she was the victim, even as she was being sentenced for nearly killing me. Mom buried her face in her hands. Dad looked straight ahead, jaw clenched. As Cambria was escorted out, she looked back at me one last time. Not with sorrow, not with apology, with fury. Like she believed this was all my fault. Like she believed I deserved it. 3 weeks later, physically healed enough to walk without wincing, emotionally healed, enough to stand upright, Dalton and I quietly got married. Not at the original venue, not with the elaborate decorations I'd planned, not with rows of guests watching. Instead, we chose a botanical conservatory on the edge of the city, a place with tall windows that let in warm afternoon light, where the scent of greenery and soil made the world feel alive and soft again. Only immediate family and a few close friends came. No wedding party, no maid of honor. The role that should have belonged to Cambria remained empty, a silent reminder of what had been lost. Not just a sister, but the dream of growing up together, building families side by side. When Dalton and I exchanged vows, my voice wavered. Not because I doubted him, but because the journey here had been so much darker than I'd ever imagined. "I choose you," he said, tears in his eyes. "Not because life is perfect, but because even when it is broken, I want to face it with you." I almost collapsed into him right then. After we were pronounced husband and wife, Mom hugged me so tightly my ribs protested. Dad took my hands, his eyes shining. "You're safe now," he whispered. "That's all that matters." But safety isn't a switch you flip. It's something you rebuild, brick by brick, breath by breath. In the months that followed, Cambria's absence carved a strange, aching hollow in our family. Mom tried to write her letters. Dad refused. They argued quietly in the kitchen when they thought I couldn't hear. "She's still our daughter," Mom would plead. "She tried to kill our other daughter," Dad would counter, voice cracking under the weight of it. I felt guilty and relieved, and then guilty for feeling relieved. Therapy helped. My therapist said something I didn't expect. Trauma caused by family doesn't heal faster because they're family. In fact, it often heals slower. She was right. I had to relearn that love without boundaries wasn't love. It was self-destruction disguised as loyalty. Cambria served 3 years of her sentence before being granted early release for good behavior. She moved to Arizona almost immediately, claiming she needed a fresh start. My parents heard from her occasionally, but each phone call was the same. She complained about how unfair life was, about how no one wanted to hire her, about how Linda ruined my reputation by pressing charges. Not once, not one single time did she apologize. Not to me, not to our parents, not even to herself. Her self-pity was bottomless. The restraining order stayed in place. One afternoon, 5 years after the attack, I was grocery shopping when I ran into someone who had known Cambria back in high school, a woman who had been part of her inner circle. "Oh, wow," she said, eyes widening when she recognized me. "Linda, I heard about what happened. I can't believe it." I shrugged awkwardly, unsure how much to say. She hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "I hope you know, people don't blame you. Cambria always had that mean streak when things didn't go her way. We all saw it." Her words unlocked something tight in my chest, a pressure I didn't even know I'd been carrying. All these years, I'd wondered if I had somehow contributed to her breakdown, if my happiness had been the match, if my engagement had been the spark. But hearing someone from her past echo what I'd felt, what I'd lived, made the truth feel less like a wound and more like a scar. It happened, it was real, and it wasn't my fault. 3 years ago, Dalton and I welcomed a daughter. We named her Claire. My parents cried when they held her. Joyous, grateful tears mixed with something more complicated. Something like mourning. Because a new life had entered our family, but an old connection had died. When Claire turned 1, a card arrived forwarded from my parents' house. Cambria's handwriting was instantly recognizable. Inside, the message was brief. Congratulations on the baby. I hope you're happy now. No apology, no accountability, just another reminder that in her mind, she was still the wounded party. I threw it away. I didn't think about it again. Now, 10 years after the attack, I stand in my kitchen, watching sunlight spill across the floor as Claire draws on the fridge with washable markers and Dalton flips pancakes with her. My life is full, warm, quiet in all the ways that matter. I don't think about Cambria every day, but sometimes in quiet moments her absence rushes in like wind through an open door. Not grief, not anger, just acceptance. Some people burn bridges. Some people set them on fire and watch them collapse. Cambria didn't burn our bridge. She shattered it with her own hands, then blamed me for the pieces. And I finally learned that some things are not meant to be rebuilt. If a person you love attacks you out of jealousy, if they raise their hands against you because your happiness reminds them of their emptiness, if they can watch you bleed and still claim you hurt them, would you ever see them the same way again? I know my answer. I came to it slowly, painfully, over a decade of healing. And now finally I am ready to say it out loud. No. Some betrayals cut so deeply they change the shape of your soul. And once that happens, there is no going back.